Okay. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. I am sharing, that's why I'm looking down at my computer right now, but I am sharing to the other pages and other things, so we're going to kick it over to Miranda for colorful commentary and talking 1, 2, 3.
I don't think my mic is on.
Oh, her mic's not on.
Are you checking? Is my mic on?
Your mic's on.
My mic is on. Well, since my mic is on, you know what I'm going to do, Brett?
What?
I'm going to go.
Ta-da!
Kicking it back to Brett.
Kicking
we
it
talked
back.
about this before.
Yes, we did.
Yes.
So, today we are talking. Today's talk is very dirty.
It's about dirt.
So it's going to be, you know, put on your mud boots and your overcoat. But we're talking about all kinds of dirt. It was her idea. Yes, it was. So
yeah.
I think we are good. I think we're shared now. We should be Oh, I got one more place to share. Sorry. So why don't you tell the viewing audience how many kinds of dirt there are?
Well, believe it or not, I just looked it up on the internet maybe about 10 minutes ago. I was looking, actually something else up a little bit, but it said, this one website said that there was 10,000 different kinds of dirt in Europe. Isn't that crazy?
10,000?
Yeah,
oh,
10,000.
Wow.
And that there is more microbes in it, in a dirt.
Yeah.
And there's more microbes in it than there is in the human body.
That's strange.
Yeah,
Okay.
I found that very
Didn't know
interesting.
That is
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and the fun part, I thought, was that there is some stardust mixed with dirt.
Yes.
And I like that.
Yes.
That means I'm part stardust.
If you haven't heard of this before, and it's true too, like how the universe came to being and everything, and the materials, building blocks, it all goes back to stars. Stars are, and I can't get into the whole thing. There's a great couple of videos about it. Stephen Hawking makes one, but it's all about how we are made of star stuff, because some of the building blocks inside of every person is stuff that came from stars, like the dirt and everything else.
Yeah, aren't stars sort of like big rocks in a way-ish? What are stars made from?
So next week we'll be talking.
I'm sorry,
we're starting a new show.
I didn't look that up on the internet today.
we should bring Aspen. We should put a mic on Aspen, because there are sometimes we say stuff. Her and I talked about this just a couple of days ago.
It's been a long time since I was in 4th grade.
I know, but it's just funny that you mention it, because again, Aspen and I was 2 days ago. We're talking about stars and something. I don't know how we got on, but it was about. She said the same thing. And I was,
I didn't say the same thing.
Yeah, you did.
I said what they're actually made of.
You don't have a mic, so you can't talk.
Anyway,
so yeah, stars being the, coming together of all kinds of minerals and all that kind of stuff,
right.
and then there are gases and they burn
right.
and everything.
But you're right. Minerals are not rocks. I did learn that.
Mm-hmm.
And dirt. It's so rocks in a way was sort of like pre-dirt, because dirt does have broken up rocks in it, like,
Yes.
small.
So before it's dirt, usually it's rock or some sort of rock formation or something, and then it gets pulverized or it gets worn down or it gets whatever, and it turns into dirt, different kinds of dirt, because there are all these different kinds of rocks. Mm-hmm. I actually used to teach earth science when I was teaching 7th and 8th grade, and that's where actually most earth science textbooks start, is with rock. And it talks about how there's so many different kinds of rocks, and they get broken down, and we get different kinds of dirt, and some dirt, repels water. And the coolest thing I've ever seen, have you ever seen thirsty rocks? Mm-mm. You don't really see them much anymore. They were big in the 70s, and I saw a few in the 80s, but they're an actual, like if you live in a place that's real humid, you can get these things called thirsty rocks. You put them in the room, and they absorb water out of the air.
Oh, so it's sort of like those little plants then that you put on your fridge, and supposedly they absorb the water out of the air as well?
Yeah.
Or I think you missed them.
You missed them, yeah.
But are they in one of those thirsty rocks?
Yes, they're in one of those thirsty rocks.
Oh, okay, so that's partly then how that works.
Yeah.
Well, learn something new every day.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. They used to sell them. They were big right after pet rocks. If you remember pet rocks.
Actually, I had one.
I had a pet rock.
But not a pet rock.
No?
I had one of those plants that you put on the fridge in the little rock thing. But
she had the plant rock. I had the pet rock. This is very indicative of our personalities. Functional, common sense, serves no purpose whatsoever.
Oh,
just a couple of googly eyes, and it's funny.
It would have been a lot easier to have a pet rock. See, the problem is, then I expected the plant to be pretty preservation kind of thing.
Yeah.
Didn't work out so well. Even though it was supposed to draw this water from the air, and we lived in Alaska, so there was certainly plenty of humidity there on the island. But I killed it anyways.
You killed it?
Of course I did.
You don't kill plants. You are like the plant woman. You make all kinds of things. You should see her garden. She just looks at it and they grow. I mean, it's amazing. The tomatoes are like this big.
That's an exaggeration. But
This big.
the tomatoes are tasty.
They're very good.
The tomatoes are tasty.
They are very good.
Yes.
Yeah, if you had one or you would not ever buy another tomato in the store unless you absolutely had to. You would grow your own or you would get Miranda's, one of the two.
Yeah, for anybody who's never tried a green one ripe tomato, I would have to say if you see one, try it.
Yeah.
Don't think it'll be icky. It's really one of the better tomatoes out there.
Yep. Yep. So, Terry Martin Mart, hope you guys are staying warm because what I saw on the weather is, boy, is it cold up there. And Bonnie, I guess you're probably still in some cold weather as well there in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Oh, is Bonnie here? Hey, Bonnie.
Hey, Bonnie.
It's good to see you.
Well, we don't really see her.
I know, but the
she
thought of
sees
seeing
us.
her.
The idea
Yes,
of seeing you.
I can see Bonnie in my head.
Yes, there you
Yes.
go. So yes, Bonnie, you can share with everybody we know in Lincoln that there's wind here in Texas as well. I thought Nebraska had all the wind, but nope. We have pretty darn strong wind here in Texas. As what was that? A few days ago, we had the wind that was just blowing through. You could look out the window, cats would fly by. It was scary.
Not true.
Okay, they weren't flying, but okay. Anyway, so
But I think our kitty would be terribly, terribly cute if she had wings.
she would be.
Yes.
She would be a cute kitty. We have 2 cats now. Darn it. I tried all I could not to get the second cat.
No, he didn't.
But here we are, 2 cat family now. Oh my. Anyway, so we're going to go ahead and jump right in because last time we talked for about 30 minutes about nothing and then we got into what we were really talking about and we don't want to do that again. We want to value your time. So we're going to jump right into dirt. And what does dirt have to do with our spiritual well-being? She has all the answers.
Okay, well, first of all, I decided that we would, the verse we should use for this week would be Matthew 6:33, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you.
So,
all these things is
yeah.
what we eat, where, and where we live and such like
Right.
that. So, okay, so basically, it starts out creation of man. He's created out of the dust of the earth and such. And so, in essence, we too are created out of the dust of the earth.
Yes.
And
what are you, O man, that you are created from the dust of the earth? Even philosophers outside the Bible would quote it as kind of giving kind of philosophical view of, the perspective of humanity and the universe. And, we are created from dust and we're created from dirt. And it's kind of a universal belief, perspective. We are created from dust.
Right, and so when you look out at just the top of the earth here, it's dirt. That's kind of the foundation, if you will, or we walk around on that and such.
Especially in Texas. In Nebraska, I understand it's wheat, but here it's dirt.
But the wheat has to grow on something.
Yes, we're different types of dirt. She has graphics. When you get to that, we have graphics.
Well, this is definitely sand down here.
This is a sandy dirt, yeah.
And so anyways, dirt, if you will, is the foundation of our own lives as well. And so what is it that grows in our dirt? It's actually fairly important. And so what we were talking about before is that there are different kinds of dirt. Some dirt, we aren't going to get terribly in-depth in this. I know that people who know a lot about dirt or people who are gardeners, there's definitely more to dirt than what we're talking about. But that's not really the whole point. We're just making a generalized overview to make our point today.
Yeah.
So there's heavier dirts that have more clay in them and such, and they hold water very well. But then, like here in Texas, of course, there's a lot of sand, and it's not going to hold the water. It's going to just, for the most part, just run right through.
We had in Sacramento, when I lived there were places like, probably the same here in Texas, I don't know. But like it always blew my mind that, in Nebraska we could get we get a heavy rain, and it wouldn't, as long as it wasn't a constant heavy rain, it rained. But in Sacramento anyway, any rain that was like any kind of suspended for an hour or something, it was flash flood warnings. And it was because the dirt was of such that it would not it wouldn't soak up the water. So the water had nowhere to go. So, like, I guess normally you go out in the water and the grass and everything, and the water, would go in. But in Sacramento, the water would just hit the ground and just start piling up because it would not absorb into the ground. And so we could get rain for 15, 20 minutes and a flash flood.
Wow.
It was
So
crazy.
is that a fairly rocky ground then?
A very rocky ground, and I don't know if they said it was saturated or if it was just so thin, the thin layer of soil, because right underneath it would have been, I guess, the rock bed. So yeah, it would just...
Oh, okay. So it wasn't able to absorb past that.
Past that, yeah.
Okay. So like we just said earlier that just in Europe there was 100,000 different kinds of dirt. Or no, wait, it was 10,000 different kinds of dirt.
Yeah.
And so, which sounds like 100,000. That's
Yeah,
a
it's
lot.
of types of
10,000
dirt. Yeah.
types of dirt is way more than I ever thought. So
If you ever watched the show Bones, one of the guys on there who was part of the team, he would always get ticked when people said, well, analyze the dirt. And he was always like, dirt has no meaning, because there were so many different kinds and stuff. He would get upset. He was a scientist, and he would get upset because it's not dirt. It's different types of
different
soil
types of
and different
soil,
types of...
okay. Yeah.
And so we say, and I always think of that. But
yeah, I realize we are definitely simplifying it today, but for the sake of analogy.
yeah.
So let's consider our bodies dirt, right? And one of those 10,000 types of dirt, or to keep it simple, are we more of a sandy soil? Is our life more of a sandy soil? And we'll call the water the Holy Spirit. When it rains like that, do we allow the Holy Spirit to soak up into our lives? Or does it just run straight through our lives? Does it run off the top of our lives?
Like in California, yeah.
So, anyways, I think God would like us to be sort of like God has a plan for our lives, and I picture that sort of like a river, and we should have more like that riverbed type soil where the Holy Spirit can just run through our lives and be useful. Take the river to places where other people can use it. And it can be useful for all kinds of things along the pathway of our lives. And so we are there as conduits, basically, to the Holy Spirit.
We could be like the thirsty rocks, because they would get bigger with the water they absorbed.
With the water they
Yeah.
absorbed.
If the water's the Holy Spirit, and then we're the thirsty rock, and we get the water.
All right, and so when you read there in Genesis for the creation and such, and Adam and Eve, there's no real mention of a house that they lived in. I'm not saying that there wasn't. We don't know exactly, I guess. But it talks about, God made the animals and the trees and plants and everything, and Adam and Eve were there to take care of those. And
How did they sleep at night? It makes you wonder.
I don't know.
Only because you think sleeping outdoors when they get cold, or But then you think if it's a perfect garden, it's a perfect world, perfect temperature. But the animals would have been all friendly and everything. There was a story I read in Russia. This girl went missing. Little girl went missing, and they, Russia, right? It was cold. This was like 2 days ago. And they found her, and she survived the cold because she was cuddled up with the dog she had been playing with. And so her and the dog were in this outdoor kennel, and they found her hugging the dog, and she was fine. And it made me think, Adam and Eve, time to go to bed, call the lion over, lay down, hug the lion or whatever.
Yeah, surely there would have been soft moss or something like that to lie on, or...
Not sure what I would have hung.
Or they may have taken some vines and shaped it into a hammock. I don't know. Sounds like fun.
I don't know what I would have gone with a lion. Maybe a jaguar or I don't know. The lion has that big fuzzy thing around the neck. You'd get your face in it. You'd wake up a mouthful of lion hair. Back to the spiritual things.
Okay, and so God created Adam and Eve, and then He gave them a job to do, and He created everything. He gave them everything that they needed to be happy.
Apparently, the thing that you said, because I read that when you said, they gave them a job to do: take care of the garden.
Yeah, take care of the garden.
Take care of the earth. Still our job today.
Yes, and it was still God's plants.
Right.
God's animals.
And
yet He put Adam and Eve in charge of taking care of it.
A great responsibility.
And granted, we live in a world today where we can't just go out to the jungle or the forest and take care of the animals and eat berries and it's all good.
But we can do things to take care of the earth. Like you said today in Sabbath school. You said God was faithful to. God had faith in us.
Yes,
I
God-
liked that.
And God does have. I mean, God is the author and the finisher and whatever of our faith, and so therefore it's His faith that He gives to us. It is His gift to us. Well, then, I mean, He then is faithful.
Yes, He believed in Adam and Eve. He had faith in them. He gives us faith. He has faith in us. I like when God is faith, because we always talk about being faithful to God, being faithful to the Lord,
and we need to use that faith and such. And yet, it is a two-way street. God is faithful to us. That creates faith, our faith in Him.
Yeah, I thought that was really. She said it in Sabbath school today, and I thought it was really good. So I wanted to make sure you said it here.
Oh, okay.
That was good.
Half the time, most of the time, 90% of the time, I forget what I said in Sabbath school.
It was good.
But we did have a really good discussion today. It was very nice. Now, I have to say, I don't know about anybody else out there, but Friday night, of course, this year was New Year's. And a bunch of people, even though we go to Sabbath school with the older folks-ish, my word, it was the most disjointed discussion I've ever participated in.
Okay, the next day. So the next day we got up. And
we all lacked sleep. It was...
Everyone was talking about something, but it was just so random. It was like, well, this is interesting. Oh, yes, last night was New Year's. No one slept.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And mustn't have, because
It was really...
nobody
all
probably
over the
including us,
place.
didn't make sense either.
Yeah.
So at least it didn't make sense to other people.
Yeah.
So anyways, but let's draw some symbology to that, even though we can't go out and, just live in the trees and pick berries and such like that and pet all the lions and jaguars in the forest.
Right.
So here on Earth, there are plenty of buildings full of stuff, right? And we judge the worthiness of the buildings, if you will, by how much money it's worth, right?
Do you know, interesting, I read an article about, there's a psychological term for it too, about people looking at houses, even though they have their own home, and looking at houses, and they're not addicted, but they have this thing where they just constantly look at homes and houses and real estate, and bigger houses than what they have.
Yeah, well, I mean, really look at how many of those home shows are on television.
Yeah, HGTV makes a capital off of it.
Yeah. So this is what we get wrapped up in.
Yeah.
And
like, look at that kitchen, look at that den, look at that pool.
yeah. And so as people, and it's really too bad, because we could be living in a perfectly good house that someone else envies and wish they could live like that. And yet we become dissatisfied with God's gifts to us.
Yeah.
So anyways, as people, we go about getting stuff and putting it in our dirt that we have. Presumably the more dirt we have, the better, and the more stuff that we have to put on it, the better. And apparently you have a villa reference?
Oh, what you're talking about, and we put all this, worth into, the house and everything they put into it. And I was reading an article, there's a villa in Rome that went up for auction, and it's complicated because of the death of the owner and the wife and the kids and everything else. But anyway, it talked about, it's this amazing home, like 400 years old or so, and they had these, however they got them, they had these great artists in the Renaissance and all this stuff that came in, and they painted frescoes on the ceilings in different rooms and on a wall here and everything. So it's full of this, artistic work by these great painters of, ancient times. And then they brought in statues and other kinds of artwork, and they found all these letters from like different popes and Catherine the Great, and handwritten letters that they had just sitting in this box. And the value of, so if you took everything that they put into the home, took it all out, it's still just the home itself had all this great artwork and stuff in it, apart from the other things that they had stored over the years. And it was interesting that it went for auction and nobody bid on it. So if you want to buy a villa in Rome that's full of ancient artwork that people are clamoring to turn into a museum, and it's worth, I don't know, millions and millions of dollars, it's still up for sale.
Yeah. Okay, we won't put that on our list.
No, because I think that they have a bare minimum, like, I don't know, it was 600 and something $million was like the starting, that's the lowest they would actually accept as an opening bid, and no one even bid that. So.
Wow. So anyways, when we are constantly trying to get more stuff that's worth more and put it on our personal dirt, I mean, that's pride. It's, to be clear, this would be like building a house on sandy ground rather than building on the rock and the more sturdy ground. Because for the most part, all of that stuff, which at this moment, okay, is uber awesome to us, whether it's the latest iPhone or the latest computer or whatever it happens to be. I mean, when it comes out, well, that's when it costs the most money, of course. Oh, gotta have it. And yet within a year or two, it's not worth but half, if that, of what you had bought it for. And so, anyways,
there's a lot of throwaway in today's society. There's a lot of throwaway everything.
Yeah, so this is kind of where the phrase "shifting sands" comes in. However, the winds of popularity blow at the moment, people lean that direction, and honestly, that cannot be the truth, because God's truth never changes. The Bible tells us that God's truth never changes, and so, honestly, though, on occasion we would like to change the truth. Just bend it a little. There's always occasions in life where we love to bend the truth, and do on occasion. And to make what we're doing good and right rather than not so good and right.
Let people talk about, just in media and stuff, people talk about all kinds of, twisting, bending the truth just a little bit so they can say what they want to say and believe what they want to believe. And instead of taking truth as it is and measuring yourself or your belief against truth, you bend, twist, slightly change the hue of truth so we can not change our beliefs, but hold on to what we want to hold on to, instead of letting truth shine light and go right and wrong, good, bad, light and dark.
You have a Narnia reference here, you said?
Yeah, but I thought that was related to putting things in the dirt.
Maybe then after this next paragraph here?
Yeah, try the next paragraph.
Okay. So in the Garden of Eden, the stuff in the dirt was the stuff that God had created, and this is what Adam and Eve took care of, right? And compare that to here on earth, the stuff in the dirt is stuff man has created, and we take care of that too, right? As much like growing it and tending a garden and helping plants to grow, right? We're still out there growing our stuff, getting more stuff to put in our house or car or whatever, And so, but we tend to be fairly concerned with this stuff because it says who we are growing, if you will, ourselves to be. But this is the stuff that gets planted on sandy ground, the stuff that doesn't hold water. And so pride tells us that the more we have, the more we do, and is the more that we are, which is absolutely not true. But
yeah, so the thing I was on about Narnia, and if you haven't read the whole series, if you didn't know that Narnia, the books of Narnia, Chronicles of Narnia, is actually the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. Each one of the books it starts in Genesis and goes all the way through. Well, it starts with the magician's nephew, and I was shocked at how many students didn't know that. They go, "Oh, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe," the first one. No, it's not. It's actually the second one. The magician's nephew is where the whole series starts, and it's like in Genesis. It's where Narnia is actually created. And one of the interesting things about it, and I just think C.S. Lewis takes theory, some fact, and some imagination, pulls it all together in a great way, because at the creation of Narnia, one of the things that happens is, like in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, one of the first things you see when they go to Narnia is the lamppost. And you go, well, how did a lamppost get in the middle of the woods? Well, that's explained in The Magician's Nephew. The guy had a piece of a lamppost, and it got thrown, and it went into the dirt, and a lamppost grew up. Because anything that went into the dirt at the creation of Narnia grew like amazing. And it was because there was so much life in the soil because it had just been created. And that's kind of the thing C.S. Lewis was saying, like in Garden of Eden. And it always makes me think when I look back and I see like I read articles about, the dinosaurs and how big they were, and plants and bugs and how big they were during that time, and then a millipede was as long as a car, and and it just makes me wonder, was Lewis onto something? It's like, at creation, even after the fall, was there so much life energy from God's creation that, the world was just so much more powerful in life energy and things growing and things, and then as time goes, it dissipates, where that power of creation is still so powerful that it still has an effect today, but not near like it did the day God created the world.
Because sin has come.
It's come and diminished.
Yeah, diminished it, buried it, if you will.
Yeah.
So basically, it's interesting to note that the first thing that got covered up after Adam and Eve sinned was themselves, right? Because the covering of light, which was God's covering over the dirt he had made them from, the dirt that held his truth, by the way, well, after they sinned, their dirt, if you will, contained a lie. And so the light, let's look at this a different way, okay? Let's say the truth was inside of them, right? And God's truth is light to us, right? And so let's just imagine that truth in there shone that light out around them. But once that truth was gone, once they didn't believe that like they did before, and they sinned, now with that sin inside of them, just by default, that light will disappear. And so the first thing that God covered after Adam and Eve sinned was themselves, and we've been at it ever since, covering up that sin and sadly liking it many times. So, you're covering the truth here?
Well, I think I was thinking of it in, Adam and Eve, before sin had not felt what shame was. And after sin, they felt shame because they hid and they covered. And, they were covering their shame. And that's one of the things that, we still try and cover shame, cover the truth of the actions they had done. So they had sinned, fallen, and yet they were trying to, at first, they were trying to cover it and hide from it, and then they tried to blame each other. But, covering always brings pain in some form. Maybe not even so immediately, but it someday covering something will bring you pain, which you made in your next point. You talked about the pain of what God had to do to give them coverings.
Right, yes. Basically, Jesus killed an animal. And
that they had been caring for.
Yeah, they had been caring for. And how painful and how heavy, really, that must have weighed on them. Honestly, I've always loved summer because you can run around in shorts and t-shirts, and it's far more comfortable than layering up in all this clothes. You have a lot more mobility. And
I don't remember. Do you like to be cold or hot?
I like to be warm.
You like to be warm. So, you would rather deal with cold.
No, I'd rather deal with being too hot.
Being too hot than being too cold.
Yeah.
That's what it's all right.
Yeah. So that the lightness of light, and was like nothing, and yet the skins of the animal against them must have been a heavy reminder of the death.
What their actions caused.
Yeah, what their actions had caused. And so we're going to use the story of Joseph to illustrate what we've been talking about. Basically, God created Adam and Eve, and they were humble. God is humble. He created them like him, and they were humble too. They didn't think to make themselves. They didn't take sides and build corrals and say, "Whoa, I got 1,500 dogs in mine. Well, I got 5,000 cows, so I'm worth more than you are." It wasn't that. They worked together and took care of the stuff that God had given them. But we tend to like to build up self, like we said before, with more stuff, and we think that creates our worth, but it's not at all what creates our worth. So the story of Joseph.
Let me explain that, because this was...
Yeah, well...
So after the fall, what Miranda is saying is after the fall, Adam didn't come out and was like, well, I'm going to build a farm over here. And he said, well, I'm going to build a farm over here. and then went out and built both their farms. And let's say one was in Texas and one was in Nebraska, and Adam got, well, I got 10,000 head of cattle.
Before the fall, Brett, they lived in harmony. They
Right,
weren't
no, I'm saying
living
after the
like
fall.
that.
I said after the fall, they didn't go into competing against them. So before the fall, they worked together.
Yeah.
And then after the fall, which is interesting, Ellen White talks about, is Adam and Eve both thought that the Messiah was going to come in their lifetime.
Right, yes, they did. But I just meant as humans in general, we tend to try to get the most stuff for ourselves.
Right.
I mean, Adam and Eve weren't created to live like that.
Right. But you will see that in Cain and Abel.
Right, yes, how sin exponentially multiplies itself.
And one was hoarding, and the other one was, Cain was obviously jealous of his brother and son, but he didn't want to give up his stuff, and he wanted to do things his way. Part of it, though, was he did not want to sacrifice and give up, what God told him to. And anyway, kind of goes in the same thing. We get our stuff, and we don't want to let go of it, and that's the pride, or that's the, I am what I have, I am what I own, I am what I do, and that's not true.
Yeah, I suppose we could have touched on any number of stories, but the story of Joseph, for example, I mean, he grew up the favorite son of a wealthy father, and surely any one of his older brothers would have technically had more of a right to an inheritance than Joseph did, but Joseph was living basically. His father treated him as if he was going to be the one who was going to inherit. So that clearly the brothers didn't appreciate that at all. But you could see how Joseph, even when he was sold into slavery, yes, he had certainly fallen in the eyes of prestige and his own self-worth, I suppose. But, as a slave, he was the head slave over the entire household of Potiphar, who was a political figure and such. And so if you're going to be a slave, he probably was ranked right at the top of slavery, right?
So Joseph's life went up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. He was born into a wealthy family. He was treated as a favorite child, and even, like I said, the other brothers probably had more right to inheritance. Joseph was obviously the father's favorite, which probably caused the others to think a little more like, oh, maybe he'll bypass and give everything to Joseph. He's giving everything to him now. And so he was the favorite, and then he was sold into, slavery and taken on camels to Egypt, right? So he was at the top, he was at the bottom. But it was on his way to Egypt. That's where, in the story, he says, no matter what, I'm going to be true to God. And so he gets to Egypt, and he goes back up. He's sold not just slave, but to Potiphar's house, who was captain of the guard. So he's this great big political figure. Now he's in charge of Potiphar's house, which is about as high as you can get as a slave. So you could have stopped there and go, oh, this is not bad. This is pretty good life,
Yeah.
Still a prison because he can't leave without being killed for running away. But he's there, and then all of a sudden, he's down in prison again because of the lie that, Potiphar's wife told. And then he rises up in the prison, even though he's running the prison. I mean, if you're going to be in prison, at least that's the highest you can be.
But I mean, as the favorite son of his father, and as the head slave basically over the whole household, both of those he could have said it was because I'm smart and gifted and what I did kind of got me here. Well, even though he had given everything to God, we have a journey of faith, basically.
But even
trust.
He got to be the head of the prison. Still could have said the same thing. Well, my organizational skills have been recognized.
It's true, but I
want to know how organized he was to be able to do that. What did they look at this guy? I mean, how good was Joseph with all this stuff? Because that's pretty darn impressive.
Yeah, it's true, but I don't know. I guess maybe did he just enjoy it as well? Because, I mean...
He was an accountant. That's my idea. He's got the personality of an accountant because, my goodness, everything you read about him is about keeping track of how much stuff Potiphar owned and where it was and what do they need. I'm guessing this would not have been a life of the party guy. He'd have been going like, well, you're almost out of ice, so I'm going to go get you 3.5 bags because that'll take you through the end of the evening. And also, your soda's about out, so you need about 4 more bottles of that. He would have been that guy at the party.
So you're telling me that I'm like Joseph.
No.
Boring.
What? Where did that come from? No.
So anyways, I guess part of the point I was trying to make was like after he spends his time in prison, yes, he was raised to being the person who was in charge of the prison. He didn't know how long he was going to be there, if he was going to be there for forever. And he was still a prisoner and basically at the bottom of any
social structure.
Yeah, social structure. And
except for prison.
right. And you have to wonder, like, when he finally made it out, when God finally brought him out of prison, and he now was second in command of Egypt, hadn't he arrived to the point, we think, where he no longer claimed any ability of his own to have gotten himself there?
Well, see, I think it started anyway on the camels on the way to Egypt.
Yeah, that's true.
But he had to have, and I'm sure he struggled just like any of us would with doubt and everything, but he had to have that kernel of faith that says, it doesn't matter where I am or what I'm doing, I am Joseph, I am a child of God, I am God's servant, it doesn't matter if I'm at home, in Potiphar's house, or in jail, I am who God made me to be, and He's with me, no matter my circumstances.
Right, but that journey of faith for him would have been the same as the journey of faith for Abraham.
Yes.
When God told Abraham to leave his country and go to the new promised land.
That took faith.
It took faith, but at that point in time, he wouldn't have been ready to sacrifice his son, should he have had one.
As evidenced by the many failings of faith he had on the journey.
Right, but when as he continued, God continued the faith journey with Abraham, and he got to the point where he was ready to sacrifice the son because God told him to. I mean, that would be similar then to Joseph's.
The same thing, yeah.
Yeah.
His journey of faith, building. So by the time he stood in front of Pharaoh in his prison clothes and barefoot and dirty and unkempt hair, he probably was like...
Pretty sure he cleaned up, they said, before he got there, right? Oh, never mind.
Getting rid of people who are contrarians.
I thought that's what it said. Didn't he clean up before?
Well, how good could they clean him up? They threw a bucket of water on him. That's what they did.
Well, anyway.
Threw some perfume on him.
That's not really the important part.
No. Now I forgot my point. Thank you.
Forgot mine. Thank you. So,
that no matter what he looked like, he's in front of Pharaoh and he's like, I'm nothing. This is God doing all this.
Yeah, which he did.
Yeah,
he
did.
Because Pharaoh was like, well, I hear you can interpret dreams.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I can't. But you know what? My God can do that for you.
And that was at the end of a long journey of faith.
Yeah, but when, if he was 17 and fresh from his father's tents, he may very well have felt as if...
Like, oh, yeah, I did, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So...
we have no idea where we're at. We're scrolling.
Yeah. It is when we recognize our utter nothingness that is who God created us to be. When we recognize we are absolutely nothing, and that's who Adam and Eve were, who they were before they sinned. Mm-hmm. But I doubt that they had to think about it like we do. They were just perfectly happy taking care of what God had created. And it didn't weigh them down because their dirt was free from sin and free from the lies that needed to be covered up. And they lived out love, and it wasn't a burden to them. Okay, so the last couple of weeks, we've been talking a little bit about the prodigal son and his older brother, and also about the two worshipers at the temple, the Pharisee and the tax collector who were praying there in the temple. And see, for the older brother, it would have been a burden to love the younger brother. And for the Pharisee, it would have been a burden to love the tax collector. Why? Because they could see their dirt. Not their own personal dirt. They could see the dirt of the younger brother and the tax collector. But they were entirely blinded to their own dirt because they had gotten more and done more to be more, and so entirely covered their dirt up and weren't even able to see that. So the beauty with being able to see our dirt is now we recognize our spiritual poverty. And anyways, I'm not saying you have to be poor and go out and live and eat in the woods and nothing but berries and leaves, but it is whatever God is asking us to give up that are we going to recognize that we are nothing and He is everything.
And this would be like we're talking about spiritual poverty, where blessed are the poor in spirit, those who recognize, like Abraham, like Joseph, and Joseph stood there and was like, this has nothing to do with me. I am God's instrument. God's doing this, and he's just telling me, and I'm telling you. He had great awareness of his, spiritual poverty, that all he could do was trust in God to fulfill his promises and to do what God told him to do. And Paul is the same way. Look at Paul as this great, and he was a great apostle, great spiritual person, and yet he himself said, I'm the chief of sinners. I'm not just a sinner, I'm the chief of all sinners. Again, recognizing that he was saying, this is not me. This is God. This is God. He tells me what to write. He tells me what to say. He brings me around. He takes care of me. He does all of it. And, Paul, his writings are all about, we don't do anything. God does everything. There's nothing we can do to make ourselves righteous. There's anything we do that's even remotely good, it's still like, filthy rags, as he said. And that's spiritual poverty. It isn't beating yourself up. It isn't shame. It isn't all that. It's understanding who God is and who we are. And that the things that I do don't attribute anything to my salvation. I do them because of a relationship with God, not trying to win a prize.
Right. And so we can compare seeking the kingdom of God first to how Adam and Eve lived in the Garden of Eden. They took care of God's stuff, and he took care of them. And to love them and to love God was not a burden for them.
He said, here's a beautiful place to live. Here's the perfect environment. Here's your perfect life. Live it. Take care of my stuff.
And so basically, we are to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and he takes care of the rest of the stuff that we tend to get so terribly, terribly worried about. And it's really a nothing. And seeking God's kingdom first and taking care of it is basically just living out that loving relationship with him by faith, and then he is faithful, and he is faithful towards us. So basically, I guess the point is, don't cover up your dirt.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Do you have any other wisdom to add to that?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
That's it, pretty much.
That's it. Don't cover up your dirt.
Don't cover up your dirt. But if you do find yourself surrounded by hot, dry dirt, look for the oasis.
All right. Well, that's probably what we're going to be talking about next week. Well, how does, because I got to thinking about dirt, and I was like, well, how on earth does that oasis get out there and form out there in a desert? And
certainly Abraham and Joseph had little oases in their spiritual journey.
Right, and so we're going to compare the oasis to our spiritual journey and such.
And
we haven't figured that one out yet, but we will.
It's got, yeah.
Yes.
And there you go. Maybe Aspen will do a video on object lesson oasis.
Maybe she will. Or maybe
Seeing
she
the
won't.
look on her face, no. That's
Project Oasis.
Project Oasis. All right, thanks for joining us, and hope you had a great week, and happy rest